I was born in Utuado, Puerto Rico, and I was raised here in Chicago. We are a vibrant culture, you know. We're a vibrant people. And that's in our nature. So to come around here and you listen to the drums or you listen to the music, you see the art coming up, that's Puerto Rico, you know. Every time I have something that's here in Humboldt Park, that's like really special. Like I light up. I have a piece up here too that is a building, 3 floors, and it's this Puerto Rican flag. I did it with Duarte. The idea of that piece was the diaspora. So you see the flag from the idea of El Morro over there in Puerto Rico. And so you see that, and the flag goes out back into Chicago, wraps around the city, and it comes back out into the neighborhood, and it almost looks like a path, you know, if you look at it like that. So that was the idea of the mural.
Yeah.
I grew up in the Humboldt Park area, stayed here since '53. I was more in tune with the culture because of my father. He refused to give it up. As a matter of fact, growing up, I was in a class with no grade because I didn't want to learn English. I spoke Spanish only, you know, and they didn't know what to do with me. And he was one of the few that bought a building where we weren't wanted. I was arrested for loitering, sitting in front of my parents' house. You know, that's how bad things got there, you know, so. And again, I was stubborn. You know, they told me to go in, I said, no, I live here. You know, but I was hauled off to the police station. My father had to get me out. You know, so we went through a lot of stuff till finally more Puerto Ricans and Mexicans started moving into the area. Then it got, then it was a lot easier and safer. You know, I felt safer. You know, but in between, people just didn't want us around. And it's crazy because they talk about white flight. And now it's coming, they're coming back. And they're expecting us to leave, you know. And, and it's been a very vicious cycle that I've seen throughout the years, you know.
In Chicago in the 70s and 80s, sometimes Mexican immigrants might seek to move into predominantly Puerto Rican areas or other Spanish-speaking areas to avoid being associated with the predominantly Mexican community and therefore being perhaps more easily identified as an undocumented immigrant. Some people thought, if I can blend in among the Puerto Ricans, I'll be safer. You know, they're not going to be immigration officials looking for Mexicans in a predominantly Puerto Rican community. The segregation of different racial groups only increased over the course of the 20th century. So as more and more of a particular population began to arrive, then they were perceived more as a threat because so many of these migrants came to very old, deteriorated, dilapidated parts of the city, really the urban core, the central districts, when city officials decided, you know what, we need to renovate. We need to, improve the streets and the neighborhoods and tear down all the slums and build, nice high-rises and housing to attract middle class and upper class people back to the city. Well, then that means that those folks got displaced. As they then started to move out into surrounding neighborhoods, that cycle of encounter and perhaps conflict and distrust and fear began all over again. So now Mexicans going to Pilsen, Puerto Ricans going to West Town towards Humboldt Park, encountered white ethnics, European immigrants or their children who felt that they had a reason to, again, keep these people out, maintain a distance from them, highlight the distinctions between them versus us. And this is a pattern that we've seen repeating itself over and over again in lots of different neighborhoods throughout the city. So in that regard, I think the murals and other kinds of public art projects become really powerful and meaningful because they become a way that the community tries to assert a sense of place and a sense of belonging.
My family has a long history here in Chicago. They came here since the late 40s. And I think my grandfather came here to work for Florsheim Shoes, if I'm not mistaken. Matter of fact, 1966, my uncle had a confrontation with a police officer in the Bucktown and Wicker Park area, and he was shot by that officer. He didn't die, but he was shot by the officer, and that's what started the first riots in Chicago. The community embraced this idea of us having our own flag and our own identity for the Puerto Rican, not only the Puerto Ricans, but just for the people in general. Every town in Puerto Rico has one. So there's 78 towns, so this one just out of nowhere became the 79th municipal flag of Puerto Rico here inside the United States. You know, it's just really awesome to know that I'm the creator and founder of a flag. You know, when the last time a flag was ever founded, it might have been a couple hundred years ago, I can't remember, but to know that is actually not only an honor, but it's something I could leave back for my family.
Yep. My name's Elizabeth Bell Reyes, and I've been teaching in the community, Little Village, for 15 plus years now. As a teenager, I hung around in Little Village a lot, so I'm really familiar with the community. And I'm also a paraprofessional during the day, so I work at a school helping students with special needs. And yeah, make art on the side. It's funny because graph is kind of where I started, even though in Chicago it's illegal to even buy spray paint. I think that it's funny that, I don't know, that you start from doing something that's so illegal, but yeah, it's the basis for what I know how to do now. Like if I didn't do graph before, and I wasn't like in a rush to trying to produce a mural in like a day or two doing graph or a mini production, I don't know where else I would have learned the process of creating a mural. Graph has shown me discipline through my practice. It's shown me how to be efficient and quick. And personally, growing up, I didn't know too many muralists. And so just practicing graph kind of led me into that scene unknowingly. But definitely like the foundation was through my graph. And now when I'm teaching in my classes and I'm showing mural work, a lot of the muralists that I'm showing are all old school graffiti writers. And that's what I lead with. Like, you're doing graph and this is what it can lead to because of this practice.
Yeah, they really just gave me creative freedom, even with the bottom. I decided, let's just do a row of candles and flowers, and they loved it. The fact that we kind of collaborated also with community members and like the restaurant owner, and in like the candle selection, adding the names of specific loved ones. I love that because again, this is not just my mural, this is like, it's our mural. And so it was important for me to have that collaboration. Yeah.
I think that for me, in this sense, it was more so like putting it in a neighborhood where it's relevant, right, to our culture, and where we understood and the community understands the concept behind the mural, I think was important for me, and not necessarily just adding my at least like my Day of the Dead ideas into any neighborhood. I think that it's just really important to stay true to kind of ask yourself, like, what space am I in? Who's gonna see this? You know, what kind of vibes am I trying to set here, and what message am I trying to relay? I hope that that's kind of a question that is being asked consistently, and just kind of doing research and pushing back against like corporate, right? They might hire you to do this and that, but you can push back and say, I think that in this community, this is what we should be showcasing.
We're here in Chicago, and we're creating new traditions here. Dia de los Muertos now, the way it is, like they're talking about the commercial aspect of it, for example, and it's a way for the Latinos, the Latine, the Chicanos here to feel connected to their culture and their roots, because they've never gone back. So for some of them haven't gone back, and there's no going back. Maybe their relatives have died. Maybe they sold off their land. Maybe they don't have no more roots in their towns from where they used to be. Maybe they don't speak the language. and the roots are here now. Like artists are cultural reproducers. We create culture. You know, we create the movements through art, like with the activists, with the activism, or with the, that's something that we've done. And then of course capitalism comes and regurgitates it back to us.
It is truly an honor to welcome you to the Little Village Dreams mural unveiling. Before we get started, I just wanted to take a moment to welcome you to the Semillas de Justicia garden. Semillas was born out of our community's desire to access land, to seed, grow, and harvest, and to have a space connected to the land and to our Mother Earth.
If you're going to make something with people in their neighborhood, when you approach them, right, like you approach them with idea and content or the process that you want to approach the project with, but the reality is that they're the experts, right? And once you present it, then they will tell you if it's going to work or not.
Gracias. Buenas tardes a todos. Gracias otra vez por estar aquí con nosotros. Mi nombre es William Estrada. Soy uno de muchos artistas.
I think there's a lot of environmental injustices here, and so to have a space where we can talk about what changes we'd like to see and our dreams, that was really meaningful. They left a lot of room for freedom, right? And so I'm not an artist, but I like painting, and I worked on the 31st Street bus stop. A lot of their youth organizers were advocating for CTA to reinstall this line. It used to be around, then they took it off, and then it impacted a lot of students because they would use that to go to school and, to get around.
Having a mural that represented this utopian image, right, of an environmental just neighborhood, but we should also address the fact that Little Village is also next to an industrial zone, right? There's various companies that house shipping containers in the neighborhood, right? So there's a lot of diesel trucks that are kind of going through the neighborhood. We had this Hilco site.
It was an implosion gone wrong 4 years ago. You probably remember crews brought down a smokestack in Little Village to make way for a big box store. City inspectors called the project botched.
Little Village is also, and Pilsen is also like one of the biggest concentration of asthma, children with asthma in the country. So the background of the color, like if you notice, it's a sunset, right? Like from sunrise to sunset, and thinking about the sunset being the future, right? And having like this refreshing, right? We start with the Little Village arch, right? And like a diesel truck that you see some of the smoke kind of dwindling, right, through the whole mural, knowing that even if we don't want to address it, it's always present, right? Like the pollution of having brownfields or industrial zones in predominantly Black and brown communities, it's always there, even if they're hidden from view or people don't address it.
Okay, thank you. 1, 2, 3. Woo! Quieren llorar, quieren llorar, quieren no.
You'll also see butterflies. And butterflies are going to be pretty common in Chicano art. Pilsen was not the first Mexican community. The first Mexican community in Chicago was in South Chicago. And murals are talking about specific events. And we say now because now we're talking about 50 years of Latinx community, largely being in Chicago. And so there's at least 40, 50 years of history to talk about. So now it's not so much like, oh, we just got here, let's talk about our history from, our homeland. It's like, we've been here, and this is the things that have happened. So I think the time that has passed has generated the experience that needs to be exhibited on the walls.
was born and raised in the Pilsen community of Chicago. I went to Benito Juarez High School, which was built in the late 70s, and I was one of the, I came from one of the first graduating classes. Then when I was about 7th grade, word got around the students that we were going to have a walkout. This was the 70s. Walkouts were a big deal. And we were wandering around the neighborhood, and I ended up at a place called Casa Slan Community Center. The place was covered with murals. And I was hooked right then and there.
Juarez High School drumline commands attention on the plaza outside the school. But the real star of the show today is a restored mural commemorating the struggles and inspiration of the school's history. All the while, current students may not realize how this high school in Pilsen became a reality. A school walkout, boycotts, years of protest.
At first, I was just hanging out watching them paint. And they had won the commission to paint this mural on the new high school on the outside. And so I would just watch, and they noticed my curiosity, and they said, you know, I was only 15 or 16. You know, hey, you want to help? Oh yeah. And that was the first time I worked on a mural there at Juarez.
My mother was born here in Illinois, and she was one of the people that got deported back during the Depression. I think there were 1 million Mexicans that got sent back to Mexico. Although she was a citizen, she ended up in Mexico at the age of 8. During the war, they brought her to Chicago, and there was a lot of jazz because of the war. She ended up working in factories. But she was a victim of U.S. racism. I ended up in Pilsen. I was 20 years old. I showed up with my brushes and my ideas of fighting for freedom or whatever. And that's when I painted my first mural. I came right on time when it was time to build the community, to inject consciousness among the working class, the poor working class. And that's when I decided to do whatever it takes to become a full-time artist as part of the rebellion. And it was about the neighborhood, it wasn't about the Chicanos, it was bigger. Back then, it's what we call the world consciousnness. By the time I ended up in Casa Slan, I met the brown race. They came from California. I went on that thing to, I was there. But this, it's the result of Tacuar. The political side of Chicanismo is not there. So it doesn't have a reason to be. Pseudo-Mexican, just because you paint Day of the Dead, or because you paint piñatas, and because you paint pachucos, and this and that. When Tacuaris does that, what he's doing is he's painting a curtain that covers the real issues of the community.
It's up to the individual, right? Because every artist is different, you know, and if you want to explore more specific areas of your psyche or the depths of your soul and this sort of thing, you know, if that's your bag, by all means do it. But if you want to do something that's a little more accessible or you know, maybe popular, well, if that's your thing, do that. You know, I don't think that an artist has to be any one specific thing necessarily. When you see people painting, like I was telling you a little bit about this, you know, that you know, I take a lot of influence from the old Mexican masters about painting in sort of clear symbols in order to convey clear ideas to communicate with the viewer. You know, the monarch butterfly wing, they've come to symbolize the immigrant, because they come from Michoacan, where they spawn in a forest. And then they travel north as far as Canada. It takes 3 generations for the monarchs to do this. I juxtaposed it with Frida because she wrote in her journal one time, later in her life, they cut off a leg, gangrene. They cut a leg off. And she had a false leg. And she wrote, feet, why do I need you when I have wings to fly? The other day somebody tagged on it that Frida was a cultural appropriator, which I disagree with. She was an indigenous woman, well, just half white, German father, indigenous mother. But she would dress in these traditional garb, and she would do that with a complete sense of reverence and respect for those cultures.
He's from there, he has a claim to that, and if he's from there and he's identifying with Frida, then it's valid in my opinion. Now, there is an overuse by Anglos of Frida. We know this. There's an appropriation of Dia de Muertos, an appropriation of so many Mexican things that maybe could make us feel like asqueada or asqueado, like when you see like, oh, it's everywhere. But that doesn't take away the fact that it still has power and still has meaning for Latinos. Instead of critiquing that it's happening, why is it happening? What does the identification with Frida mean? What does it do for these individuals? How does it perhaps empower them? You can't like regulate people's identifications, their identities, right? But you can find out why and what does it allow them to do.
People are curious. It's now safe to sort of explore those racial dimensions and what does race mean, because it's not the same thing as the social lives that people actually live, right? But the way in which we can explore this now is not the way they could have explored it 50 years ago, 100 years ago, 200 years ago, certainly much earlier than that. And so I think in that moment when this indigenous aesthetic is expressing itself, it's because for the first time people felt like, I can do this. I'm going to embrace this thing. You know, we're all trying to understand the implications of colonization in one way, shape, or form. And there's pushback and there's affirmation about it and uncertainty about it, and because we are learning how to actually live with it and express it and claim it, how do we also do it now understanding that people live those lives?
See, in Latin America, the indigenous people is living people, it's a living culture. So the Huichol still exists in Mexico. The Zapotecas still exist in Mexico. While the Taínos, which by the way was a name that the Spaniards gave to the Arahuacans, were exterminated the first 50 years of the colony. So it was genocide. So for the Puerto Rican muralists to recall that semilla, is to go to the many stories that we had or have been created about the Taínos. In Mexico, they continue to exist. So for a Mexican muralist to put in there the indigenous form or image or so on is a political statement about wanting to make visible something that is becoming invisible, but that it still exists.
I was on the wall with Kiam in Boys Town. Someone was furious and they screech off in their car, angry with their kid and their wife, yelling that we have to paint white people of power, like with money, stuff like that. And then that's what makes you feel like, oh wow, so this is really needed. Usually when you go into a community to do a mural, you have meetings with the stakeholders and they talk about what's important, what their neighborhood is going through, like gentrification. That's what Logan Square wanted to talk about. That's what happened to my work. My work was erased because of gentrification. This mural represented the neighborhood. It had Taíno stuff on it. It was about like music and culture. It showed Puerto Rico. We carefully listened to what the students were talking about and the families back then, and we found out that the mayor at the time had called what's called a blitz. He had ordered a blitz, which is when they just go around and whitewash anything that has graffiti or whitewash, whatever.
Well, many of these pieces now that we are being asked to put them on boards, they said that it's to protect the buildings of the city, but for me, for my experience, is to be able to displace us anytime.
It's about the impermanence of the work. It stays with the community until it's ready to go down. It's deteriorated or no sé, whatever happens. But with this, your contract is only 5 years, so it's like it's going to be removed in 5 years. Potentially removed so that we can put something else up, which is what they were doing when they whitewashed my wall. It's like they're getting rid of it because they can, because they no longer see it relevant without asking anyone else about it,
The situation in Pilsen back then, it was horrible. Where I painted on the right side, I painted people organizing to fight, and the conditions of living in Pilsen were horrible. The people that want to fight back, and you have the people that are the problem. The gangbangers, the police, the corrupted elements in society on the left side. It was very powerful. They did it without even asking me for permission. And so what was the deal? He said, well, the police killed 3 kids and 26, and we want to paint their shadows on your mural. Almost like graffiti. If I go erase their stuff, they're going to take care of the whole mural and erase it. This is a mural that's been there since 1980, well respected worldwide. And at that very moment, nobody cared. I called the elder man and I told him, I says, what is happening here? I don't get it.
That still is art. Through grieving, creating a mural because someone lost their life is grieving and is a form of art. There's a disconnect. And that's why there's this, those murals get graffiti on them, because the elders don't have a relationship with these new generation. And they also feel like sometimes, the mural, they think of murals as how Diego Rivera created mural, because we're contemporary artists now. We're Mexican, but we're contemporary, or we're Chicanos, but we're contemporary. So we have to talk about what's happening with us. And graffiti was part of that, and street art is part of that.
I created this character that I feel like speaks for me, and I feel like I like it too because it don't stereotype me and my ethnicity and my heritage. Like Mexicans, Chicanos, we can create something that's not just sometimes stereotypical. This can also be reflective of Chicano culture. My graffiti started turning into basically illegal murals. I would go paint my character, start painting basically I would start doing art, illegally. And at first when I started it, nobody was giving me walls, nobody was giving me opportunity or painting. So I would do that, and then I remember doing paintings and then writing stay fly, and I would paint my bird characters, and I would write stay free, da-da-da, and I would take pictures and I would send them my pops while he was still locked up, just inspiration, yo, keep your head mentally stay free type of thing. So I just started doing a lot of that, and then I think I got an art show, then it evolves into people give you more opportunities.
There is a big change. I mean, the work that's branding, it's more about, when mural painting came up, it was about having some work that was historic, right? It told a story. There were some very epic murals. Now we have work that's about branding. It's about this is me. and this is my symbol. I want to paint about this, and this is my character. And people like it. I don't know if it's changing anything, but it's definitely adds to the feeling. A person is having a feeling, they're having an experience as they walk past it. There's room for all of it. There's room for all of us. And that's the one thing that's constant in life is change. And so if you can't get with the change, muévete, or be a part of it. I'm not saying that an artist needs to change the way they're doing their work. It's just like, be open.
There was a specific mural that I remember growing up when I was a child. It's just these 3 crosses with these people they look kind of like they're crucified. And I remember my father, we would drive by and he would always tell me if I act up, then he's gonna tell that guy that's on the wall to stab me with a stick. And it was always the scariest thing to see that mural, but that mural is like not only what is engraved in my memory, but it's kind of for me, a landmark kind of mural. It reminds me of home. When I see that mural, that means I'm home. I wish I had somebody that was able to pull me in and say, hey, can you help me paint this wall of this mural? And I would have probably not, gone down that other path of, and getting involved with the streets and stuff like that, and being in and out of jail and having a lot of family problems and, so I wish I would have had that. So I think it's really important because a lot of these kids are creative. They just don't have nobody to help them figure out how to express their creativity. Everybody has their own opinion on art and what it is to them, whether it's fine art, whether it's street art. For me, it's just me being creative and artistic. It doesn't matter to me, but what matters to me is that I continue to do what I do and continue to restore murals that are important to this city.